All right, we are live. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Let's Talk Lake County. I'm your host, David Rich. I have a very special guest on today. Sorry, I'm used to saying tonight. It's 11 a.m. Rebecca Whitcombe, Esquire. Do lawyers still go by Esquire?
I mean, some do.
The pretentious ones do.
I don't feel the need to.
Right. Okay. It sounds a bit archaic, but okay. Family law lawyer is on here today to discuss. She's focusing now on retirement division, and we wanted to have her on to talk about the legalities of retirement and all. How are you, Rebecca? How's it going?
I'm doing okay. I'm having a busy week, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, sounds good. Lawyers are busy people.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to ask you first to kick it off, what was your reasoning process? And your explanation might actually give light to other lawyers' explanations of theirs. How did you get into why family law? Why didn't you choose something else?
I chose family law because when I finished law school, I wanted to do something that felt like I was actually making a difference in everyday lives of people.
Yeah, well, that's you choose the right place.
And yeah, exactly. And I was a paralegal before law school, working in corporate litigation, and I knew that I didn't really want to do that. And I really wanted to do something that would involve helping children. And through family law, I ended up representing children and doing all kinds of stuff. And so that was my main reason for going into family law.
No, those are good reasons. That it makes sense. I mean, they're directly tied into what you're doing now. So yeah.
Right.
But there is a thing about family law. I mean, when I lived in Portland, I had a gaggle of friends that were lawyers, and I just happened to meet them one day at a bar, and we hit it off, blah, blah, blah. And now you and David and Aaron, and for some reason, I'm attracted to lawyers. I don't know why. You're interesting people. Maybe because I'm
actually good people.
Right? You're good people, right? Exactly. No, that's true. Yeah. But that family law has this sort of reputation of being a very ominous and foreboding area of law to practice because of you like you said. But on the other side of the positive aspect of it is you're watching families get destroyed and divorces and children taken away from their parents, and rightly so, sometimes not rightly so. And that's what are you doing taking this kid away? It's crazy, stuff like that. It's very intense. Would you agree?
It's very intense. So there are actually studies that show that the process of going through a divorce for the parties, for the husband and wife, is similar to the process of the death of a loved one. Meaning you go through the similar stages of grief and anger and denial and all that kind of stuff. And so you're basically dealing with good people going through really bad stuff, going through one of the worst things in their entire lives. So it is very emotional. There is a lot of sort of almost psychology involved, because there's a lot of calming down our clients and holding our clients' hand, walking them through what is one of the most difficult times of their lives. So it is very intense. And sometimes as their lawyers, we get the brunt of their anger or, their emotions or whatever. So it is very emotionally exhausting also for the lawyers who practice that kind of law.
Yeah. That's tough. It'd be tough.
Yeah. Sure. Especially when you represent kids.
Yeah.
So exactly. I represented a lot of kids, and those are the ones that I lost sleep over more than anything else. Are you doing the right thing by this child? Is very, very difficult. At least it was for me.
I would imagine. I hope so. It means you're a human.
Yeah.
If you're emotionally detached, there's probably something wrong with you. It's really interesting. And somebody's got to do it. So
Right.
So that everybody deserves representation, and these things need to be resolved in a legal manner. And
Right.
That's tough, though. Are judges specifically assigned to areas of law, or is it just what happens in front of their
from where you are? So here in Lake County, there are actual divisions for different types of law. So there's the family law division,
Right.
that does divorces and custody and child support and parentage, things like that. There are, I believe, 6 or 7 judges that only do family law in Lake County.
Isn't Randy one of them?
Randy is one of them.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Everybody, that's just a mutual.
Yep. Randy is one of them. Get into some of the smaller counties, there may be literally one judge that does every kind of law in that county.
Okay, so it's just really a matter of like command.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like I can see you got a county that has 2,000 people in it, then you probably don't need.
Right. They don't need 7 judges just doing family law.
Right, exactly.
Like that.
Interesting. Okay, well that's interesting. How many kind of categorical divisions of law are there? I mean, there's how do lawyers categorize them? Like I mentioned to a friend of mine, lawyer friend of mine in Portland. I'm like, oh yeah, she does a retirement law. He's like, what is that?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, she's in family law. He's like, oh, okay.
Right. So my practice area is sort of a niche that falls within family law. Generally speaking, there's civil law versus criminal law when you're talking big
okay,
picture.
that's right. Okay, gotcha.
And then within criminal, you've got felony versus misdemeanor kind of thing. And then within civil, you've got family law, small claims, it runs the gamut of areas of law.
Okay. But that's all under civil.
On the civil side. Yeah.
Criminal's just felony, misdemeanor. That's it.
As far as I know, but I don't practice criminal law, so I don't know too much about it.
That's intense too. I need to have Dave on here to talk about defending criminals.
That's one of the things I think a lot of people misunderstand. Just because I'm a lawyer doesn't mean I know everything about every kind of law.
Oh, no.
We specialize.
I know. People have that expectation of,
yes.
lawyers and, or even like doctors. I mean, I've done doctors, I'll ask them questions, though they don't. My GP say, I don't know. I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Right.
I don't expect you to be perfect. So... Okay, cool. Well, let's get into the legalities of retirement. Kind of give us I don't know, general to specific, if you want, however you want to approach it.
So my practice has to deal with the division of retirement plans when people get divorced. A lot of people, when they're getting divorced, 2 of the main assets they tend to own that get divided is their house and their retirement. And so under federal law, people's retirement plans are protected. Like if you have a 401k and you were to file for bankruptcy, your creditors can't reach the money in your 401k. So it's very much protected. But there are some exceptions. One of them is that insofar as you may have been paying into that 401k while you were married, it is considered a marital asset and can be divided in the divorce. But because of these federal protections, federal law also requires that this special order be entered to allow for that division of that retirement plan. It's called a quadro, a qualified domestic relations order. Depending on the type of plan, it might have a different name, but sort of broadly, we refer to them as quadros. And that's basically an order that gets sent into the administrator of the plan that says, this person has an interest in this retirement plan. By virtue of their divorce, this other person is entitled to receive a portion of it. Here's how much they're entitled to get. Here's how they're entitled to receive it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the part that we do. Most attorneys who practice family law in general don't do quadros because every individual retirement plan in existence has its own separate rules and procedures for how they have to be drafted, what kind of language you can use, how they'll divide the plan, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of detail involved. And so most family law attorneys won't do them for malpractice reasons because they're afraid of getting it wrong. Yeah. So my practice does only retirement division. I was a family law litigator for almost 20 years. And then about 5 years ago, decided that I was going to focus solely on this because there really is a need for it. Because if the family lawyers aren't going to do it, who is? Yeah. And so there are very few of us that sort of focus exclusively on this type of law.
I mean, that's good marketing on your part and for just picking up the slack from everybody else. I understand, I wonder a lot about these kind of like being a doctor, you do one little bit thing wrong and you get sued for tons of millions of dollars, and again, going back to them being imperfect beings, they're going to do something wrong.
Right.
That's a real drag. So, yeah, but I mean, so good for you for doing it. Cause again, somebody needs to,
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a need. And we talked about how exhausting the whole family law litigation part is. The one good thing about this is I am no longer involved in like the day-to-day divorce fighting thing anymore.
That is nice.
I sleep better at night doing what I do.
See, that's, yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, some of these occupations, these professions are just, I told you before about how I like a nice, easy, stress-free life. It's because I consider things like this a lot. I'm like, screw that.
yeah.
Yeah,
no, I get it. There are a lot of people who go into family law, especially with the younger generations, like millennials and lower,
Gen
who
Z
don't have the longevity that, say, the boomers had to practice this, because it is so mentally and emotionally exhausting that a lot of them are like, I can't keep doing this. And they either leave the profession altogether, or they find a different way to focus their practice or something like that. So I just kind of got lucky.
Yeah, no, good for you. And some people just have this sort of like, psychological formidability to kind of just charge through it.
Yeah.
But again, what else does that mean about them? Are they detached emotionally, like, stuff like that?
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah, a good friend of mine is an ER doctor out in California, and he's just not interested in anybody's personality. He does his job, and I guess he's a really good doctor. So the detachment is actually advantageous to us, just not as their friend necessarily, but
right. The detachment can also get you in trouble when we're not getting.
Oh yeah, when you're just crude and rude or something like that, condescending.
Like that.
Yeah. He is an arrogant little. Okay, anyway.
Yeah.
But okay, so like who finds you out? Like, do people, like, just divorced people say, hey, we're having issues with our retirement divisions to help us out? Like, does it trickle into your office through family law courts and stuff like that? How do you get clients, I guess?
So usually through their attorneys.
Through their family law attorneys who don't want
to. Through their family law attorneys. A lot of attorneys, because they know this is what we do, when they draft the final divorce documents, they'll put our firm name in their divorce judgment as the people who will do the retirement division. So that's the majority of them. That's how the majority of them come to us.
And so okay, is there any sort of legal boundaries around, like, do the law firms have to be, these cases have to be distributed equally amongst local law firms, anything like that, or can they just pick and choose whomever they want?
They can pick and choose whomever they want, and there aren't really a lot of other law firms.
Right, because there aren't a lot of other ones.
So I inherited this practice from Kathleen Curtin, who was my partner for the first few years. Yeah. She established a name for herself, especially in Lake County, as the person who does the quadros. So the vast majority of family law attorneys who practice in Lake County knew her and know me. And so they know that I'm the one that can do this. So a lot of attorneys will just put our name into their divorce judgments and tell their clients, you got to call her for this retirement division part. And we've got attorneys in Lake, Cook, McHenry, DuPage, Will, Kane, Lee County, Iroquois County. Like, we've done all over the state.
Because you're one of the few, very few.
Yeah.
Okay, so just as far as like markets go, that you're high profile.
Yeah.
Because you stand out, because you're only one of the very few. That's very interesting. What was I going to ask you? Oh, law school. How do you get prepped for something like this that's so niche? Do you have to so you didn't go over retirement divisions in law school. Like, so when you decided to get into this, what was the beginning of the process of researching it so you knew what you were talking about and knew what you were doing?
I have dabbled in it since I started practicing. Like, my first job out of law school, the partner that I worked for gave me a file and said, we need a quadro. And I figured my way through it without knowing anything. And that happened for a couple of firms that I worked with over the years. And then when I went out on my own in 2010, I started taking quadro cases. So I had some experience over the years with it, because it's a part of family law. And when
So just a lot of trial and error.
yeah, absolutely. And then, like I said, about 5 years ago, like exactly as the pandemic happened, I had a conversation with Kathleen Curtin, who was the one who had this practice. And she was like, I really want to retire, but there's not, I can't just trust anybody with this practice. And I don't want to just shut it down. And I don't know what to do. And so I was like, I'll do it. And that's how it happened. And I just spent a few months just learning everything she knew and learning about the different retirement plans and how they can be divided and how to draft the orders and just all of it, and just absorbed her wealth of knowledge. And that's kind of how the whole thing happened. I shut down my own private practice in 2020 and partnered with her and moved into her office and started doing this and this alone. And now 5 years later, it's all I do, and I actually really enjoy it.
That's great. That's good, because that's important too. And like,
right.
Again, going back to like my stress-free lifestyle, like I consider people who like hate their jobs. Like it's such a massive part of your life. They hate their jobs, they hate their relationships. I mean, well, that's your whole life.
I like what I do. I have a great staff here. Like I look forward to coming to the office every day.
That's fabulous. I really love to hear that. I really do.
Yeah.
It makes me happy when other people are happy.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand why that isn't the main goal. But anyway, I want to ask you about family law judges, not specific ones, but like just like, have you noticed like a difference in like their demeanor to other types of judges and other different areas of law, just because of the intensity of the area of law? Do you find them to be more authoritarian, less authoritarian, more compassionate, less compassionate? Like,
I mean, I would say in general, I do find them to be more compassionate.
Okay.
Because I think, especially when they come onto the bench after having practiced family law as a private attorney, they understand the emotions that are involved in this process and how difficult it can be for the litigants to be going through this. And I think, there are a lot of family law judges who will be a little more understanding about sort of letting the parties have their say, even though they may not be saying anything that's relevant to the legalities of the situation.
Get it off your chest, get it out there.
Right, because they know sometimes people just want to, like you said, get something off their chest, or they want to have their day in court or something like that. And I would say that, most of the time the family law judges are pretty good about doing that and allowing for that and showing some compassion when people are going through a very difficult situation, and especially when there's children involved.
Yeah.
I mean, there are judges who, will bend over backwards to make sure that children are safe, no matter what it takes. And I don't mean going outside the law. I mean, whatever they can do to help a situation involving children, they're going to do it.
Good. Excuse me. I watch a lot of videos for like years now on policing in America. I mean, ever since the George Floyd thing, it just kind of caught my attention. And amongst those videos, and I watched, pro cop, con cop, good cops doing good things and cops doing bad things. I try to be fair. But amongst those videos, there's definitely some of like, DCFS or whatever showing up at a person's house with cops, knocking on the door. We're here to take your children from you.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow, that is, I'm not saying it's not warranted or anything, like try to suspend judgment there, but that's intense, man.
It is.
Like I remember one lady, like, and she was like a meth head or something. She's like freaking out. You're taking my baby. You're taking my, well, yeah, you're
yeah.
Have you ever seen, besides just the intensity of the situation, warranted or not, justified or not, have you ever, what's your reaction to that?
Very mixed.
Yeah, because
on the one hand,
simultaneously.
Yeah, on the one hand, DCFS has a very valid mission in terms of protecting children. On the other hand, DCFS is understaffed, underfunded, overworked, and difficult to deal with. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So, it's, you want them to be able to do their job, but you want them to be able to do their job thoroughly and well. And sometimes they literally don't have that luxury.
Oh man, that's
what I mean?
That's hard to hear.
So it is hard to hear. I
I
mean,
mean that is my imagination's running rampant with overlooked important details and taking the wrong kid or taking a kid that really doesn't believe to be deserve to be taken.
Right.
Wow.
And I will say there are far too many times within the practice of family law where people try to use DCFS as a custody tool. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
they'll make
they weaponize their children.
Make false claims about child abuse.
Oh man.
Just to be able to try to get custody of their children. And DCFS has an obligation to investigate those just as much as they have an obligation to investigate anything. So there are family law litigants who are taking up the time of DCFS, not because their children are actually being harmed, but because they see it as a way to, get a leg up in a custody fight eventually or something like that. And that's one of the things that really, really angers me.
Oh yeah, that sounds like pure evil.
Yeah, because
weaponizing your children, using your children as leverage. Sorry, go ahead.
Their time is so much better spent, investigating real instances of abuse,
right?
Rather than playing these games that people like to play in family law court. Unfortunately,
that is awful.
Yeah.
Now, are you aware of any cases in at least in Lake County where a child was taken away and they legally and morally should not have been? Or is that,
I don't, but that's largely because I'm not really practicing in that area anymore. So I don't keep up.
Okay. But no, it's still, I'm assuming that if it did happen, it would, you might hear it, through the gossip chain or something.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything.
That makes me happy because it means that there's the less likelihood that it did happen if you don't know about it.
Yeah.
Which would be good. Because I just couldn't imagine somebody, I don't have any kids, but if I did and somebody took it away, based on what I knew that it wasn't right, I didn't do that or whatever. Oh, I don't even know what I would do. But
I did see a recent Illinois, I think it was an Illinois Supreme Court opinion that just came down. It was a Hague Convention case.
A what?
The Hague Convention. So it's like an international custody thing. Okay. And the parents, one was a citizen of Israel, one was a citizen of Hungary. They were both citizens of the US. And at some point, the husband had time with the kid in Hungary and refused to return them. Even though
interesting, international stuff involved.
Yeah, even though the mom in the US had custody. And so they literally had to go to court, and it eventually made its way to the US Supreme Court, and they had to return the child to the US.
They did to return the child.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, okay, what is that called? International treaties with other countries about criminal expropriation? Is that what it's called?
That I'm not sure, but the one that we deal with when it's relative to family court is the Hague Convention.
That's the name of the type of case you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's another wrench in the gears is international stuff. He's in another country. What are you going to do?
Right. Exactly.
That's wild. That's wild. Okay. Well, good. I got you I put you on here for 25 minutes. I think that's a lengthy amount of time. You have a busy day coming up. What's the name of your firm? Just so people.
My firm is Curtin Whitcombe. Curtin, Curtin, and Whitcombe, which is my last name.
Yeah, which is right there.
Yeah.
So okay, yeah. Anybody interested in contacting her? Curtin Whitcombe. That's pretty easy to remember.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Rebecca Whitcombe, Esquire, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on the show and explaining all this to us.
Sure.
I have 1,000. What's that?
I said thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you again. Whenever I have lawyers on, and because I've had David and Aaron on before, as lawyers, there's so many interesting curiosities I have about the law. from philosophical issues down to
Right.
like just practical ones and everything else. And so maybe we'll have you on again. We can get a little deeper into like the bigger philosophical questions, like what is justice? No, but,
Happy to do it.
it's a good one. So anyway, thank you, Rebecca Whitcombe, for coming on. You have a lovely day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk Lake County. I'm your host, David Rich. See you next time. Hold on one
Take
second.
care.
Rebecca. There's a